just pull up your email and type.
I could, but actually I'm the worst.
It's just not that easy to do here. Yeah, I never like switching screens. I actually tried that once or twice. It's like, skip this, just take notes, transcribe them later if I have to. It is 7 p.m. Time to welcome everybody physically and virtually to the May 17th Advisory Plan Commission. Meeting's called to order. Will staff please confirm the presence of a quorum?
Ms. Berkman? Here. Mr. Horke?
Here.
Mr. Johns?
Here.
Dr. Kelleher? Mr. Maui?
Here.
Mr. McCarty?
Here.
Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Ms. Boljaric?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on, we have revised minutes from the April 19th meeting to approve tonight. May 5th minutes are not yet ready for approval. Does anybody have any further questions or comments regarding the April 19th minutes? If not, is there a motion to accept these minutes into the record?
So moved.
We have a motion from Victor McCarty. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And a second from Andre Maui. Will staff please call the roll?
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes?
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Boljaric?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Will you please review the rules and procedures for tonight's meeting?
Due to the COVID-19 emergency as declared by the Governor of Indiana, the format and conduct of the meeting has been modified to comply with executive orders regarding the conduct of public meetings, public hearings, and public gatherings. Relevant portions of the Indiana Open Door Law have been amended or suspended during the pendency of the emergency. For tonight's public hearing items, the meeting has the following structure. The department will summarize the petition, then the petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present to the Plan Commission. The president will open a public hearing, and individuals will be given 3 minutes to speak. The public hearing will be closed when all interested members of the audience have had a chance to be heard, and all emails received during the hearing have been provided to Plan Commission members. The petitioner will then have a chance to respond to comments, and the Plan Commission will follow with any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the petition. For our non-public hearing items, the meeting will have the following structure. The department will summarize the petition and highlight any changes or modifications since the item was last before the Plan Commission. The department will also describe what action, if any, is necessary to be taken. The petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present any changes, and the Plan Commission will then act upon the petition. For our general rules of conduct, we ask that you please not disrupt the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, we ask that you please quietly exit the room. Also, please silence your devices at this time, and if you must answer them, please quietly exit the room. If you are attending in person and wish to speak in regard to a petition scheduled for a public hearing, then please fill out a yellow card, which are available up here by the podium as well as in the back by the door, and bring it to me prior to the presentation of that petition. During your comments, please state your name and address into the microphone for the record, and we ask that you not repeat previously stated comments. Your presentation will be timed, and you will be advised when there is approximately 30 seconds remaining. If you are not attending in person and you wish to comment on a public hearing petition tonight, then you should email your comment to planners@westfield.in.gov with the petition name or number included in the subject line. Those comments will be forwarded on to Plan Commission members and the petitioner. We would also like to remind everyone to please speak directly into the microphone so that your comments can be put onto the record, and also please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just add a quick follow-up to that last point? I received some feedback that we all could do maybe a little better job of speaking directly into the microphone. Sometimes I think it's hard for folks to hear, so thanks.
Okay.
Hopefully I'm not too guilty of that, but I'll try to make sure it's pointing at my mouth. We have 5 items under our consent agenda tonight. We've all had the opportunity to review these. These are on the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve these 5 items on the consent agenda
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Andre Maury moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Dave Schmitz. Will staff please call the roll?
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spillier?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. 2 of these items will show up during our items of business. They had comments that were predicated upon approval during the consent agenda. Moving on to items of business, the first one is one of those 2 items, 2104 ODP 08 West Fork Whiskey.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. Pam Howard with the Community Development Department. Before you this evening, we have an overall development plan for 1 lot on 13 acres in the Osborne Trails PUD. This is located at the northeast corner of 191st Street and Horton Road and was zoned the Osborne Trails PUD in 2017 with an amendment approved in 2020 that updated the standards to accommodate the proposed project. This property was subdivided as a result of annexation last year, and therefore only the ODP is being required at this time, and a minor plat is also in process to approve the split from the annexation. The DDP for this site was on your consent agenda this evening. This is one of those 2 items. This item did receive a public hearing on April 5th and is ready for your approval with the conditions noted in the department report. The petitioner is available if you have any questions. I'm also available if you have any questions of the department. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume there's no petitioner presentation?
Correct, no presentation.
Okay. I'll go around the group to determine if any of us have any further questions. I made myself a new list. We can, instead of going alphabetically, I'll go by order of how we're sitting here. We'll start with Mike Johns.
No comments, no questions.
Very good, thank you. Dave Schmitz.
No questions, no comments.
Thank you. Cindy Spaljarek.
None, thank you.
Excellent. Victor McCarty.
None, thank you, sir.
Kristen Berkman.
No, thank you.
And Andre Maui.
No questions or comments, thanks.
I have none either. So we are ready for a motion to approve the overall development plan. The condition that it was contingent upon the recording, or there are 2 conditions rather. I was going to make reference to the consent agenda, don't need to. But we needed a motion incorporating the conditions as shown on the agenda and the department comments.
Before making a motion, just wanted to double check. We have 2105-0DP-08 in the action item, but it's labeled as 2104. So I just want to make sure I made the right number.
That should be a 2104 under the, under your action with the condition. That is a typo.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I'll make a motion to approve the overall development plan for 2104-0DP-08 West Fork Whiskey with the following conditions: that 1, the approval be contingent on the recording for the associated annexation plat 2105-SFP-35, and 2, all necessary approvals be obtained from the Westfield Public Works Department and Hamilton County surveyors prior to the issuance of an improvement location permit.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Dave Schmitz seconds. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spillier?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good. Moving on, next item of business is 2105 ODP-10 and 2105-SPP-10 Chatham Hills, Section 6B. This is an approval.
Thank you again, Mr. President, members of the commission. Pam Howard with the Community Development Department. Before you this evening for your consideration, we have a primary plat and overall development plan for 66 lots on approximately 35 acres in the Chatham Hills PUD. This site is located at the northeast corner of 199th Street and Horton Road and was incorporated into the Chatham Hills PUD with the 2018 amendment. This item did receive a public hearing at your May 5th meeting and is eligible for your approval tonight with the conditions noted in the staff report. Petitioners are present. They do not plan to present, but are available for questions, as am I if you have any of the department. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll solicit commissioner comments, starting this time with Dave Schmitz.
None for me.
Very good. Cindy Spalcherik.
None right now, thank you.
Thank you. Victor McCarty.
None for me, thank you, sir.
Kristen Berkman.
None, thank you.
Andre Maui.
And none here, thanks.
Back to the other end of the dais, Mike Johns.
No questions, no comments.
Very good. Then we are ready for a motion to approve this item. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 2105 ODP 10 and 2105 SPP 10 with the following conditions. Approve a landscape plan to be delegated to the department during the secondary plat and construction phase. Second, all necessary approvals be obtained from the Westfield Public Works Department and Hamilton County Surveyor's Office prior to the issuance of an improvement location permit.
Do we have a second?
Second, Cindy Spalcherik.
Thank you. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spalcherik?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving along, item next is 2105 ODP 11 and 2105 SPP 11, Agility.
Yes, again, thank you. Pam Howard with the Community Development Department. Before you this evening for your consideration, we have a primary plat and overall development plan for 2 lots on approximately 5 acres located at 16466 South Park Drive within the South Oak PUD. As the property currently exists, it is 2 parcels, one of which lacks any road frontage. The proposed plat would reconfigure the boundaries to create 2 conforming lots. Proposed vertical improvements were on your consent agenda this evening as well for approval. This item did receive a public hearing at your May 5th meeting and is eligible for your approval with the conditions noted in the staff report. Again, the petitioner is available but does not plan to present. They and I are both available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any commissioner comments, starting with Cindy Spalcherik?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Victor McCarty?
None, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Kristen Berkman?
No, thank you.
Thanks. Andre Maui?
No questions or comments.
Very good. Mike Johns
No questions, no comments.
and Dave Schmitz?
No questions, no comments.
Very good. Moving along. Do we have a motion to approve with the associated condition?
I make a motion to approve the primary plat and overall development plan 2105-SPP-11 and 2105-ODP-11 with the condition that all necessary approvals be obtained from the Westfield Public Works Department and Hamilton County Surveyors prior to the issuance of an improvement location permit.
Second.
Thank you. Victor McCarty seconds. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Hiller? Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spalcherik?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving along to our last item of business, 2105 PUD-17, Osborne Trails Phase 2 PUD. This item is in front of us for a recommendation to council.
Yes, thank you again. Pam Howard with the Community Development Department. Before you this evening, for your consideration, we have a proposed new PUD district to be known as Osborne Trails Phase 2 PUD. This 60-acre site is located at the southwest corner of 199th Street and Horton Road. The proposed development would be an expansion of the existing Osborne Trails development, adding 192 single-family residential dwellings subject to the same standards as those being built today. This item was introduced at the April 12th council meeting. A neighbor meeting was held on April 26th, and a public hearing in front of your body at May 5th. A few changes have been made to the ordinance since the public hearing, which are outlined in the staff report. I do have the petitioner here. They do not plan to present, but are available for questions, as am I if you have any of the department. Thank you.
Thank you. We will poll commissioners this time, starting with Victor McCarty.
I have no questions or comments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Kristen Berkman.
None, thank you.
Very good. Andre Maui.
None, thank you.
Mike Johns.
No questions, no comments, thank you.
Very good. Dave Schmitz.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Cindy Spaljerk.
None, thanks.
None from you as well, nor do I. This item is in front of us, as I said, for a recommendation to council. Does anybody care to make a motion to make that recommendation?
I'll make a motion that we send a positive recommendation to the city council for 2105 PUD 17.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded by Dave Schmitz and Mike Johns respectively. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spaljerik?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes,
Motion carries.
Very good. We have one public hearing tonight, 2104-ODP-06 and 2104-SPP-06 Ackerson Farms.
Hang on.
I'll remind everybody while we're getting the materials on the screen that if you're attending virtually and have any comments, please be sure and start typing quickly and send your comments to planners@westfield.in.gov. And if you have a lengthy comment, at least quickly send us one that says, I'm going to send you more comments so we know to wait for you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, members of the Planning Commission. Good evening. For the record, Kevin Todd with the Community Development Department, filling in for Dane Crabtree this evening. Item before you this evening, as mentioned, is a public hearing item for overall development plan and primary plat for the residential portion of the Ackerson Farms development, located on the west side of Ditch Road, north of 166th Street. The property is approximately 145 acres in size and contains, I think, 403 single-family residential units, lots and units combined. As mentioned, this is scheduled for a public hearing this evening, which was properly noticed and advertised for this evening. With us here are representatives of the development team. They plan to make a presentation, so with that, we will hand it over to them. Following their presentation, we'll be available for any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Clint Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Westfield Homes. We are a developer.
Hang on, Clint. Can we hit the mic button? No, down. There you go.
Yep.
Thanks.
My name's Clint Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Estridge Homes. We have been a leading developer and home builder in Westfield and the surrounding Hamilton County area for the last 50 years, including what is now a significant investment in Westfield, where over 90% of our business is in the Westfield community. We've become known as a developer of neighborhoods that have extensive attention to detail, vast amenities, and a community lifestyle. Some of those recent communities along Ditch Road have been Centennial, Harmony, and Serenade. And now we're excited to bring a new community in that Ditch Road corridor. The Ackerson Farms PUD, we are presenting the residential portion of that community. It's located just on the west side of Ditch Road between 166th Street up to the Midland Trace Trail. The trail is going to be an extension of the trail, which we're going to provide, but it is going to be an extensive feature of the community. We're planning enhanced amenities surrounding and flanking that trail, bringing it through the neighborhood, and we've put a lot of thought into what kind of amenities today people are wanting, and it includes a lot more outdoor amenities, walkable community, and so we'll have multiple parks scattered throughout the neighborhood. The northern portion where the Midland Trace Trail will cut through the neighborhood will have an outdoor amphitheater, a farmer's market pavilion, and then a trail system that connects to the pools and the sport courts and the other parks that are throughout the neighborhood. The PUD was approved in 2006, and we have been working with city staff extensively for the past several months to ensure that our plat is compliant with the PUD and that we've brought everything up to the current City Works standards. I'm going to turn things over to John Dobashowitz to go through some further details on our neighborhood.
Thanks, Clint. As I ask, could you advance those slides, and then we'll go from there. Good evening, members of the Plan Commission. For the record, John Dobashewitz with Nelson and Frankenberger. We represent the petitioner, Estridge Development Management, and in addition to Clint, here this evening is Roger Foster with Estridge, Ken Keeney with Innovative, the project engineer is attending virtually, and Jim Schinner, an attorney with our office. As noted, the matter before you this evening is a primary plat for Ackerson Farms. If you could advance to the next slide, Kevin, and members of the Plan Commission to your left. As indicated, the subject real estate is south. This is the Midland, to get everyone oriented, this is the Midland, State Road 32, Ditch Road, 171st Street, 166th. This is Eagletown Road. There's real estate to the west that's part of the Westgate development positioned here. This is Maple Knoll Elementary School. This is the bus facility. Again, the Midland bisects the Ackerson site here and then comes along our north perimeter in this vicinity. The area that's the subject of tonight's petition is highlighted in red. It comprises 146 acres. The balance of the Ackerson Farms real estate, which is approximately 90 acres, it's shaded here to the north in blue on both sides of Ditch Road. So exclusively, we're reviewing tonight the area in red, which is predominantly the residential component of the Ackerson Farms PUD. If you could advance to the next slide, Kevin. As Clint indicated, one of the primary components of the plan is the extension of the Midland Trace Trail. The location here is circled in red, and the trail would be extended from its current terminus today at the northeast corner of that bus facility as part of the Sonoma neighborhood at their far western and northern corner, across the Ackerson parcel, which exists on the east side of Ditch Road, and then across the north perimeter of the real estate. If you can advance to the next slide, Kevin. There we go. As noted, the plat includes approximately 146 acres. The area includes Residential District 1, Residential District 2, and part of the LBH district of the Ackerson Farms PUD. If you follow, the Residential District 1 with specific standards that were established for lots that would face 166th Street. Residential District 2 is predominantly south of the extension of 171st Street in this vicinity, and the LBH district is north of 171st Street and crosses over to both sides of the Midland Trail, but again, only the component south of the Midland Trail is being presented for consideration this evening. This additional area outside the plat includes the remaining LBH district area, which is north of the Midland Trail. It's outlined in blue, noted earlier, and is comprised of that space. You can see it shaded in blue to our north. Future commercial activity and uses are anticipated in that space. Access to this 146 acres will be from entrances on Ditch Road. There's an entrance located here. There is the construction of a roundabout at the termination of 171st Street today, the extension of 171st Street through our site, and then to match up with the plat that was previously approved for Westgate at that location there. There's a primary entrance along 166th Street, and then you can see numerous stub streets, one located here to an 80-acre parcel that's along Eagletown and 166th Street, another stub street located here, and then two stub streets to the north that'll provide additional vehicular connectivity into those future commercial areas within the Ackerson Farms PUD. The street network provides interconnectivity between home sites and numerous park areas across the site. The details submitted with the plat include a public realm diagram that shows you these different park areas throughout the site and the proximity of a 2-minute walk to those various park locations. All homes along 166th Street, as I mentioned, will face 166th Street. Additionally, along Ditch Road, you can see the lots here. The side of homes face Ditch Road, the front of these homes face Ditch Road, the side of these homes face Ditch, the front of these dwellings face Ditch Road, and then all the homes north of 171st Street, all of these homes face Ditch Road and are alley accessed. Significant open space and amenities are distributed across the real estate, which Clint mentioned, and will be constructed in compliance with the requirements under the PUD ordinance. Planned amenities include, at a minimum, a community clubhouse, large playground, and neighborhood park. Additional parks including sport courts, swimming pool with a neighborhood center, trail connections including the Midland Trail, outdoor concert and movie facility, as well as a fishing pond. Specifically regarding trails, asphalt trails will be constructed all along Ditch Road, all along 161st Street, surrounding the public park here with the pond space on both sides of the existing legal drain that crosses the site. These are classified as waters of the U.S. There's pathway proposed on both sides, and then you have a path that would extend along the west perimeter of the real estate connecting up to the Midland. And then, of course, the Midland picks up right back here. This real estate here is the bus facility. This is where the Midland stops. We pick up the Midland, take it to Ditch Road, across Ditch, across the north perimeter of the site. It would be further extended in the future over to Eagletown Road and intersect in here with the path that's part of the Midland Trail through the Westgate community as anticipated along Eagletown Road. Home sites have also been laid out with the front of the front on open space areas as shown on the color site plan. All of these homes positioned here, front with an alley, front on the open space area. All of the homes around this interior open space area, front across the street they're all facing toward the open space area. Homes positioned here, this is a park space. All these homes wrap around in front, the open space. Park area here with homes fronting on the open space. This is a park space surrounded by a street with all the homes facing and fronting out onto the common area open space. Several home product lot types are proposed under the primary plat. Products include large lots in Residential District 1, those lots along 166th Street here as a transition to 166th Street. Single-family lots including alley and street access in Residential District 2. That area again predominantly in this space. And then alley-fed lots as well as townhomes in the LBH district. There's 2 areas of townhomes that would flank the Midland, and then townhomes that would be positioned here flanking the west perimeter or real estate. Point to note would be that all the dwellings in this space in the Westgate development are townhomes, so we have townhomes facing townhomes, and then 3-story townhomes facing the Midland. In total, the plat includes 401 single-family lots and 3 blocks where 2- and 3-story townhomes will be constructed. The 3-story townhomes will flank the south edge of the Midland, and the 2-story townhomes with the area shaded in yellow will be along the west perimeter of the site and north of 171st Street. In conclusion, as Cliff indicated, Estridge has worked for several months with staff on the plat, resulting in the plan which is in front of you this evening, which will be compliant with the standards of the Ackerson Farms PUD. This is actually the 3rd iteration of plan review. It was submitted late last year, again in January for staff review, and then the most current plan, which you have in front of you this evening, all in an effort to confirm compliance with the requirements of the PUD for the plat that's presented for you this evening. We appreciate your time tonight. We'll remain available to address any questions at this stage or after the public hearing, and then at the conclusion of tonight's consideration, we'll circle back with staff, confirm the final remaining elements in the 22-page staff report is compliant with the requirements of the Ackerson Farms PUD before we present the matter back in front of the Plan Commission for approval consideration. With that, I'll conclude and would be glad to address any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you. We'll move on next to having the public hearing, which I will open at exactly 7:30. Do we have any cards for people present?
I have no cards.
Thank you. Do we have any emails yet?
No emails.
All right. We will keep the public hearing open for a couple of minutes. Same reminder as a little bit ago. Anybody attending virtually that has comments they would like to make regarding this needs to email planners@westfield.in.gov. And at least if you are slow at typing like I am anyway, send us a note that says I'm sending you comments so we know to wait. We are now at 7:32. Have we received any emails from anybody indicating they wish to make a comment?
I have not seen anything come through.
No. All right. I'm going to close the public hearing then at 7:32. This originally came to us, as was indicated, quite some time ago. Cindy Spoljaric and I, along with Ginny Kelliker, who is not able to be here or attend tonight, were on APC at the time when this went through quite a bit of work and effort to get it to the point where it was really a very commendable plan that received a 9-0 recommendation from Plan Commission to then Town Council, where it was approved 3-0, as I recall it, according to the notes. It is substantially different, and from what I'm gathering from your discussion or your comments, John, there have been some things that have already transpired. It might be helpful maybe if Kevin or somebody on staff could kind of recap where it went and where it got to the point where we now have it in front of us, and then we'll go around with commissioner comments.
Yeah, I'll, without having any of those previous iterations in front of us, I honestly don't recall the one last year, but the one earlier this year that was submitted and reviewed and went through our TAC process has been updated to what we see on the screen here. And there were, I mean, off the top of my head, there were a handful of issues with some of the lot sizes, not meeting the minimum lot size standards. Those have been corrected. There was some discussion internally with us and the petitioner about open space requirements, meeting the acreage requirements of the different districts and sub-districts of the Ackerson Farms PUD. There was some discussion about a little bit about the road network, and actually quite a bit about the road network. And one of the major changes that came out of some of those discussions involved the kind of the main north-south street that you see here. One of the earlier versions had it wasn't all aligned where you could go north to south without having to make a hard turn in either direction. We felt it was important to have a better alignment that seemed more consistent with what we saw in the PUD plan. You know, as mentioned in the presentation, the walking distance, the walking circles that you see, I don't know, I think we have an
It's the
exhibit.
last page.
Yeah, here's another. So this is what they have now. Oh, it doesn't show the whole thing, but
If you turn to the last page of our presentation, it's on there.
yeah, okay, good. So making sure that the walkability of the original plan was being met in this layout by having homes within, I think, a 2 or 5 minute walk from amenity areas. That was an important part of the PUD document, and we wanted to make sure that was being reflected, as well as a significant Central Park area here was a point of discussion as well. So, John, feel free to, if there's any other big things that I may be missing off the top of my head, but those were the things that stand out to me.
Yeah, just if I might, back last fall, there was informal meetings with staff on an engineered plan, which didn't go to TAC. And then after those informal discussions, a fully engineered plan was submitted and went to TAC earlier this year in January. And then Estridge continued to work with staff on refining the plan to confirm compliance, which resulted in the report that's in front of you this evening. There's a few items that staff notes as outstanding. It's for Public Works to confirm that we've made all the revisions necessary, as well as staff. There's a couple typos in the acreage, site acreages, and to confirm the open space complies with the requirements of the PUD.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing that just kind of came to me, one of the other kind of points of discussion is, well, two things regarding some infrastructure things. The road width standards of the city has changed since 2006. They're wider now. So in order to comply with the current road width standards, that dictated maybe a little bit different of a layout than what we saw in the concept plan of the PUD. In addition, the concept plan was not engineered, right? So the detention ponds that are shown on the concept plan were woefully inadequate to detain necessary runoff for this project. So that is another kind of significant difference that you might notice between the two plans. This shows, I mean, this is an engineered site, so this shows the actual drainage facilities needed to accommodate this project. So that again kind of dictated some of the design and layout of open space and how it interacts with the rest of the project.
To expand on that, if I might, if you follow audiences right and commission, so all these streets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across that frontage, where previously the standard was for a 52-foot wide street, had a narrower street as well as narrower tree lawn. Today's standard is for an 8-foot tree lawn and a 59-foot right-of-way, which is 7 feet larger. So there's 35 feet of lost opportunity, if you will, for larger open space areas, because the city standard today provides for a 59-foot right-of-way with 8-foot tree lawn, because they don't want to see trees closer than 4 feet to curb or sidewalk as a protective measure. It avoids replacement issues in the future regarding sidewalk and other items. And as well, Kevin had indicated, the concept plan, which was in front of the Plan Commission at the time, I think may have had a small sliver of detention and very little, if any, to the south. And of course, it was a sketch prepared by the architect for the purposes of conveying general ideas and concepts across, and it's defined in the PUD. But again, when we sat down, when Estridge sat down, we got engaged earlier this year. When Estridge sat down last fall, Estridge wasn't involved in the time in 2006. They reviewed, along with staff, the 22-page staff report you have for compliance with the 4 corners of the ordinance, the development requirements that they had to comply with to generate a plan that would be acceptable per the terms of the ordinance.
Thank you. It was hard to discern the difference in the street widths, but the amount of blue from old plan to new plan was notably different. So, all right, we'll start going around for commissioner comments. First up, if she cares to do so, would be Kristen Berkman.
Thank you, Bob. Kevin, is there any way we can pull up the original concept plan for this, please, out of the PUD? I think it's on page 141, if that'll. I think that was it. Yeah, there we go. And I'll preface my comments that I'm anxious to hear from Bob and Cindy tonight as well, because I know they were involved when this initially went through, as was Dr. Kelleher. But what really pops out to me looking at this original concept plan and what really fits with the comprehensive plan of the new suburban area, which is where this is located, is the amount of green space and pocket parks. And while I understand what you said about this wasn't engineered and there needs to be some other retention areas, when you compare this plan to what's being proposed tonight, it looks like a lot of water to me. And we've lost these green areas of pocket parks. And there's some curving of the roads that happened, I think, on this original plan to give kind of a different feel versus what's being proposed tonight. Feels very linear, straight streets of a lot of houses. And without understanding the setbacks, I'm afraid that's going to look very tunnel-like in the proposal. So I guess I'm going to kind of cap my comments with that, because I do want to hear about from those that were more involved at the time. But this has a lot of pocket parks in it, and I guess I'm just really sorry to see those go in this newly revised concept plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Andre Maui,
I have nothing additional to that. Thanks.
thank you. Mike Johns,
I would just, I guess, agree with the idea that the linear nature of what's being currently proposed, the density of what is being currently proposed. And I too would like to hear more from Bob and Cindy with respect to the original plan. Thank you.
thank you. Dave Schmitz,
I appreciate the revisions you made with the orientation of the house, kind of the houses that, kind of updating it to what we expect and appreciate now with having frontages facing the main thoroughfares. And I assume with those sides, there's going to be architectural enhancements on all the side yards that have faced ditch as well. But at this point, I really don't have any more comments and just want to listen to what others have to add.
thank you. Cindy Spaljarek,
It makes you feel really old when this was approved in 2006, and you were already up here a year at that point.
that was not my intent by bringing that year up. Sorry.
Right. We were still a town. This was
Yeah.
before our UDO.
Long before a lot of the things that we all think about more commonly these days.
Exactly. And the whole traditional neighborhood development design was supposed to be kind of a key part of this. I went back and tried to find all my old written materials on this and couldn't find it, unfortunately, because 15 years that happens. But some of the key hallmarks of that project and the presentation are what's missing for me. And I know our standards now call for these wider roads. The problem is, in a TND designed project, it calls for the narrower streets. And, you know, so that we have a disconnect right kind of there, in my opinion. But anyway, I sent a message to staff, and they sent it on to you, I believe, so you have it, but I'll read it for the Plan Commission. Very informal. I have, just in one section, there's 130 homes, all lined up, with a few minimal small areas with a little landscaping on some ends. The LBH area was not intended to be just housing lined up linearly like this. Back in the day, this whole concept was sold as a traditional neighborhood design with a mixed type of buildings and such. I don't see that reflected here. I tried to pull up the presentation materials, couldn't find them. Back then, we had a comp plan subcommittee, and these things we went through in detail. And so again, a lot of this was maybe what I'm remembering from the detail in the subcommittee that we had that might have not then made it into the ordinance like it should. We were new to PUDs at the time. So in R2, it's much the same issue. The concept had features to reduce the linear quality, which helps slow the traffic and make it more inviting. The concept had divided streets with landscape medians, not these cul-de-sacs, and did have all the fronts facing open areas and fronts facing ditch, which you do in the majority. In R2, the front facades facing open areas have rear load garages. I don't know why I put that in there, but the streets had vistas that terminated in aesthetically arranged open areas. And that's kind of a key, and that's one thing that if you look at the concept plan, you will notice that most of the vistas, if you will, coming down the streets terminate in something more than dead ends or more houses. It was designed specifically to be inviting with vistas. So those are the items that conflict with what I believe are critical aspects in the intent of the ordinance. These types of issues were what the whole design intent was based on, so I find them important. Can you please clarify if my assessments are inaccurate? I also want to point out that the ordinance does specifically call for a tree inventory prior to development plan approval and a traffic impact study.
And to respond to the question regarding a traffic impact study and tree preservation plan, the ordinance specifies that a tree inventory shall be done at the time of site development approval and building permit approval. So it doesn't establish a requirement for tree preservation, but says those trees that shall be preserved shall be inventoried and identified on the final construction plan, so not at this stage. Kevin, if you can jump back to our plan, but leave this one ready at the hand. I can use, well, scroll up if you would please to the, there we go on that one. So there's a pocket of trees that are right here that'll be preserved on the plan, and that's the only substantial stand of trees. There might be a one-off, one here, throughout the site. We have streets that terminate at vistas. There's pocket parks here. All of these streets generate visibility from traffic as it drives down the street. If you come down this way, you're at this one. Coming down this way, you're at these park spaces. Traveling this segment and this segment, visibility. To the north, you're coming up this long street to the visibility of the farmer's market and amphitheater space. These streets terminate in the neighborhood center, as well as these streets terminate with vistas to the common area. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with the comment about vistas, but nonetheless, it's not a standard within the ordinance. I know the ordinance that was reviewed by the Plan Commission in 2006, again, Estridge wasn't involved, but it specifies, and staff's noted this in the staff report, is that the illustrative site plan, and this is the language that the Plan Commission forwarded and the council adopted. The illustrative site plan is an illustration of the possible site plan permitted for the purposes, concepts, and standards of the Ackerson Farm PUD, which is intended to be a reasonable illustration of the anticipated general type of site plan, is not drawn to scale and is subject to change. I mean, all that language tells me is that the plan that we just had up from 2006 is a sketch that the architect did on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper to represent what might be. The ordinance that the council and Plan Commission reviewed has this language in it that says the future plan doesn't need to comply. So if we're talking about intent, we didn't talk with staff about what the intent is. We talked with staff about what the requirements are. It would be perhaps misplaced if the intent was, I should look at this concept plan and I should look at the final exhibit and say to myself that there should be any connection. I think there is a
But there's
reasonable
where the
connection between the
disconnect
two.
is there, John, just like the width of the streets. Back then, we could say that these were going to be narrower streets.
But
You
there
know,
shouldn't be a disconnect. The text of the ordinance is finite and it's definitive, and it calls
But
out
what
the
it would have
concept plan.
construed to the built environment at that point is different.
I'm
and-
not sure I understand.
The way this is working now is not what was created in the vision, in the statement of intent, if I remember it correctly. Can we find that? Do we have it? The statement of purpose, intent, you know, the summary of the project, even just the first
For the whole,
paragraph?
for the Ackerson PUD in 2006? I don't know if I can find that right now.
It's just, some of these are, they seem small, but taken together, they're critical aspects of what this was supposed to be.
Right.
It's
And-
why
and
we
they
allowed
just-
as many units as we
they-
did, at
they
the
just
densities
didn't-
we did.
They just don't appear in the ordinance. There's not a prohibition in the ordinance to cul-de-sacs. The density complies with the number of units that are permissible under the ordinance. It's not more than what's permitted. It's less than what's permitted under the ordinance. So if we received a comment that I'm concerned about the density is less than what's permitted under the ordinance. It's not a legislative function where the plan
It's
commission
not an
offers
issue
a
of density,
recommendation.
John. It's an issue of design, not of density.
Right, but there's standards in the ordinance with regard to design, and what I'm telling you, in the last 8 months of review with Estridge, they have shown that they conform with the requirements of the ordinance, or we wouldn't be in front of you this evening presenting a plan.
When I admit, you've taken steps to try, but I still have problems because I think the end product is not what it's supposed to be.
And they don't get credit for trying, they get credit for
know.
complying.
I know, but what I'm telling you is these key factors that showed up in the concept plan, which were part of the ordinance, now granted, they were part of a concept, not legally tied to it, but those concepts were what was important, and I'm not seeing them here.
And respectfully, where today, because we prepare a lot of PUDs, respectfully today, there are standards and ordinances that say thou shalt comply substantially with this plan. And that language doesn't exist in this ordinance, and to the contrary, it says it's subject to change. We've had PUDs that have been rewritten in the past, Spring Mill Trails PUD, Eagletown PUD over the course of time. And those new definitive standards, because the Plan Commission and Council found out, wait a minute, we want to tighten those requirements so we make sure that the product that's delivered is clear at the time of zoning, rather than a illustrative plan of what might be. We as the community, through the Plan Commission and the Council, have tightened that down to, I want to see exactly how it's going to lay out when you propose it, so there's no question in my mind, rather than 16 years later or 15 years later, we have a plan that fully complies, which some may believe is different than what might be intended. We just can't administer, the staff can't administer intent, the staff administers, professional
And
planning
that's
staff
the
administers
problem when we do
requirements.
these large creative PUDs,
Right.
and they're old, and they should have reverted years ago so we could start new with new standards and
You know, we
applicable
Estridge
today,
really thinks
but that's
it's a
not-
great neighborhood, it's a great plan. Like Clint, they did Serenade, they did Harmony,
Oh, I
they
know.
did Centennial, these are all great neighborhoods. This is as nice a community as those are, if not nicer with all the things. So it's not an apology that they're different than what people might think the intent was. It's, hey, we've taken this 200 plus pages, and come up with a neighborhood we think is really great, and we couldn't ask for it to be approved by the Plan Commission unless we complied, and that's where we're at today.
And that's where I just feel like it's not compliant, John. When I look at what is in that ordinance and what it translates to, it doesn't meet it. It might, for a setback and a density and those kind of things, it does. But taken together as a full ordinance, that 150-page document, I'm not seeing it here.
Yeah, and the professional planning staff has reviewed it in detail and told us we comply, and the outstanding items will be resolved before we come back to you for adoption or approval consideration. Again, we have to abide by the four corners of the ordinance and can't abide by what intent might have been 16 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up on that, just to say it maybe a different way, I mean, the text really is governing here. There, as mentioned, there is no substantial compliance with a concept plan written into this document. if there are standards in the text that you believe are not being met, then please share those, because we'll go back and look at those and evaluate again. And, you know, we're human, we might have missed something, but especially in a 200-page document that we don't look at every day, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I understand the desire to try to tie, we started down that same path too, right? To try to tie the plat review against the concept plan, and then we scoured that document for anything that would tie, you know, the concept plan to compliance, and we just simply couldn't find it. So.
That's all I have right now, thank you.
I'll go ahead and go to Victor next. I have a habit of skipping over you. I
No,
want to
you're
make sure I
fine.
didn't do that,
You're fine.
and then we'll come back to me.
I'll
So
try to be quick a little bit. Not
just
to.
be thorough. You don't have to be quick.
Okay.
If you get too lengthy, I'll gavel you.
Okay, thank you. Not to make you feel older, but
Please
thinking
do.
on this, I was 13 years old when this was first approved, so it's a little bit, I'm done. It's a little bit overwhelming for me just to go back that far, look at what was approved, and I mean, looking at the timeline of, it was initially going to get started in 2008 and projected end date of 2026, so it's a little overwhelming to me. So all I will say in regards to this is I wish the current layout of what you have is what the Spring Mill Trails PUD was today, because as you know, I live in Water's Edge, and it's just been a mess over the past few years of everything having to be cookie cuttered in and not having anything be comprehensive. So I love the ambition and aesthetics design of the updated plan, of having sort of the village center and the way it flows a little bit. I think there are pocket parks, and you illustrate that with the circles of 5-minute walks here or there. You know, you really hit the nail on the head in terms of walkability. For me, it's just I wish that this was, as well as the future developments when it comes to the business being the outlots along 32. I wish this was what was ended up being north of 32 with the Spring Mill Trails PUD. I just don't know. Again, just feel a little bit overwhelmed for me with this being 400 lots, and you know, we talk an awful lot about density here, but yeah, I just feel like my hands are kind of tied here. So, but no, I appreciate the updated work to everything that's been going on to it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things that I recall specifically that helped result in the 9-0 approval in the first place years ago for this, and it's hard to think about this any other way for those of us that weren't 13 at the time. It started on a path that it wasn't going to get approved. I'm convinced of that. And the nature of how it evolved, we've had similar things occur more recently, where what hits our screen in the first place is just not something we can support. And over the course of how the process is intended to work, changes are made, and it brings different elements into the project or changes things in a satisfactory way, more so than what was initially presented. I guess what I'd like to try to implore upon you is work with us in a similar way this time, because to your point about ending in vistas and the similarity between Plan A and Plan B, if you had these neighborhoods built identically to their plans somewhere, and you could drive around the current plan as proposed and the plan that was approved in 2006, you wouldn't feel like you were in the same neighborhood. It is distinctly different. To the point that Cindy was making, I feel much the same way, that there was a lot of effort put into trying to make this look different than other places. It was to be a new way of thinking, and the amount of small areas that were good visually. Beyond their small size, they made a much bigger impact. And, well, in some interpretations, you're technically correct. When you pull in off of 166th Street as it's designed currently, though, you get 2/3 of the way up to 171st Street before you bump into something, whereas in Plan 06, that happens shortly after you would pull into the neighborhood. I mean, there's a lot that is so different that maybe it doesn't look so much on the plan in your mind and in the language. But it's what several of us that have been doing this for a long time really felt was a good thing to have here. This we don't, right now, tell me if I'm speaking out of turn, don't feel is perhaps the right thing to have here. And knowing what we've approved nearby and how Westgate, beyond this, had come in way early, but had a design that largely prevailed, and it was something that we were happy with ultimately, and it did get approved a long time ago. And we were fortunate enough that street widths notwithstanding or other changes that might have occurred, that's being constructed largely the way we anticipated it to. This is not. So I don't know how we get beyond that, but this is our comments in a public hearing, and we hope to hear back from you with something that addresses these, and if couching it into language and moving on, then that's what you're allowed to do. We're here to try to evaluate what you've presented and give you feedback. So this is it. Some of the early commentators, starting with Kristen, had kind of deferred somewhat. After having heard some of what's now happened, we'll go for round 2 here to see if that's prompted any further thoughts that other commissioners might like to bring up. So, Kristen, round 2.
Thanks, Bob. I think what everybody's trying to say is there was a spirit in this PUD that we're not feeling in the new concept plan. So if you can go back and think about it, we would appreciate it.
And we're happy to do that. I just know we're here and we're trying to balance definitive standards in the ordinance for an approval that would allow Estridge to move forward. We're trying to balance that with the request to feel the spirit of the ordinance, which was on an 8.5 by 11 concept exhibit, and make it more look like that concept exhibit, if I'm not mistaken the request that you're making.
Can you say it again, John? I'm sorry.
I
got lost there at the end.
To give you an example, earlier this evening, the Plan Commission reviewed several development plans, and the development plans had to comply with certain standards, and the Plan Commission took them as a group and said, there's a consent agenda, do the items comply or do they not? And the professional planning staff confirmed for you that they all complied, and there weren't any questions. I understand that the concept plan for those developments may or may not have looked like what's being presented, but nonetheless, the Plan Commission approved them because they complied. And that, at the end of the day, is what we're asking for. We're not making apologies for the plan that we've proposed because it complies. Just the observation that we'll do the things we can to try to address those comments, but without, can you do X, Y, or Z? We wouldn't be able to plug those into the do we comply category, so we're eligible for your consideration for approval. So as definitive as you can be with what you'd like to see done as a modification, it would help us in evaluating the request, is what I'm getting at. And staff, we're gonna have a discussion later with staff, and they're gonna say, I don't know what to tell you about the spirit of the ordinance. I have this document, and you have to do this or you can't get approval, and we understand that, but that doesn't mean we're not listening to your requests, and we'll see what we can do with the best we can to address them.
There's obviously a big time gap here that's been discussed, and so things like, well, now we'll widen the roads, and I know that's part of our ordinance, so you went back and did that. I think we're just saying there's open space, there's vistas, there's way this original plan, whether it was engineered properly or not at the time, feels. There's a huge open space in that middle. And without the acreage, I don't know what that is, and it calls out a water feature. I don't know if that had a fountain in it. I'd have to look back on that intent, but I do know, I just looked back on the original PUD, and there's kind of an A through Z type of feel where I get a pretty good feel for what the group worked on. You know, it's like the definition area. So I think there's some potential in here, and I think you're asking a very fair question. So I would, not to put work on Mrs. Folgeric and Mr. Jorge and Dr. Kelleher, but I would appreciate if they were able to articulate some of those things that they feel like would bridge the gap. And I'm happy to help as well, if need be.
Okay. Anything further? If not, Andre Maui's turn again.
Thank you, Bob. And before I share my comments on this, I'd like to say that you can go back to skipping over Victor unless he can curtail his comments about age from this time forward, maybe. I like the way Kristen talked about the spirit of the concept plan. I think that was a good word for it. When the agenda posted and that evening or whatever evening, I started clicking through to prepare, and I opened all the exhibits as I often do, and then just start going through them, you know, one at a time in tabs, the way you see them on the screen up there. I looked at the plan, and then for a second, like, wait, is this a PUD? What are we looking at here? Because I was not here in 2006, and I lost track of what it was. Oh, okay, we're past the PUD stage. The reason I had that momentary thought was, oh, this is too rectilinear. This isn't going to fly. You know, if we were looking at this now as a PUD, I'd have that same comment. I like the curving streets. I like the vistas, the green space and everything, and that's usually what we'd be going for. But then reviewing it in the context of where this is in the process, I came to that same conclusion where it's comply, not intent. And in fact, I think I've probably said in these meetings before sometimes that we need to rely on the drawings, the concept plans and things, as long as we have the verbiage to tie to those substantially. And I didn't find that here in such a way that what we're looking at wasn't, in my mind, compliant with the extent to which that concept plan was referenced. So I guess leaving the comment at this, whatever you can do to put any of that spirit back in, I appreciate. I think I understand that you're up against, you know, the letter of the ordinance and compliance. I get it. That's what ultimately rules. But if you can take any of the comments that you're hearing, especially from those, Bob and Cindy and presumably Dr. Kelleher at some point, who were part of that original discussion, I think what you've done is good, and maybe if you could infuse some of that back in, it could be even better.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Mike Johns. Anything further?
I would just echo what everyone else has said at this point, and please go back and do your best to try to get back to what the original thoughts were on the project. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Dave Schmitz, further comments?
Nothing additional, it's been said.
Thank you. Cindy, anything? You
I think
elaborated
I've-
fairly well already.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not sure
think
what
I've
else I can add either.
said a
but-
lot, and most of the things that I think are playing into my thoughts, again, go back to what's in that concept plan, and not to say those specific items, but those ideas that are in the concept plan, if that makes sense. The loop streets with the open space in them, the heavily landscaped median areas.
Like what's here, the street and the street surrounds these, and the loop street here, the
Well,
loop street around this end.
All three of your cul-de-sacs, cul-de-sacs usually don't belong in a TND project. So
And again, I not to belabor the point, but we'll do what we can to address some of these, but cul-de-sacs within the development, they're not prohibited by the ordinance. And again, when we go back to the concept plan, I kind of almost wish it wasn't there, because it shouldn't be considered for a document that we're gauging compliance by, whether that's intent or a standard, the language in the ordinance, which is where we're at 16 years later, is here's what we say we have to do to gain the Plan Commission's approval.
Right, but
It's
all
just a
those
real
things
challenge
taken-
for us to gauge intent based upon a 8.5 by 11 exhibit that the ordinance says that it shall not be a it shall not be a document that is registered for compliance. It's almost like we're fighting it's an uphill battle. I don't mean to seem, we're gonna be responsive, we're gonna do those things, but if staff tells me that in order for us to submit our plans and documents for approval from the Plan Commission, the Plan Commission has to certify that we're consistent with the concept plan, we'll do that, but I'm saying it because I know that doesn't exist, but we've established, or there's a lot of comments about how you can do this, which we see on an 8.5 by 11 exhibit, which I know I can't do today based upon the conditions which exist today.
The things that were shown in the concept plan, not necessarily where they are, it can be somewhere else. Just those features that you see, there was a roundabout central to the project, a little circle, right? And that served to slow the traffic down there and to provide an area where it didn't have to be another stop, but a circle. And that seems like a small thing, right? But it's not, because it went into the whole project. It also took into account the open space that it was on and served as that terminus when you're going around the circle. So there's all these things, though, and again, I know I'm going back to the discussions we had back then, which are not germane at that point, but they all brought us to the fact that we approved a concept that was based in these principles. That's what I'm saying. It's the principles that it was based on in the concept plan, but, and again, I'm not saying it has to be that plan, but those elements that were in there should be there.
And there's lots of those elements that didn't find their way into the PUD document that we're faced with complying with today. And I'll just leave it at that.
I'm sitting here wondering what the Weaver Design Group folks might have as far as a comment to your description of what has been included in the old plan. I mean, I'm sure it's not engineered, but I think a lot of thought went into this. It's not as rough as you're kind of characterizing it to be. But I echo Cindy's comments that the kinds of things that are in here, as I'm looking at the old one and comparing it to the new one more, it seems like some of these elements are very present in Centennial. So it's been done in the company before. Other neighborhoods have similar things that are newer and perhaps are held to the same street width standards and tree plantings and wherever. So do what you can for the spirit, or whatever the term was that Kristen had suggested, try to bring it back in. And we'll close with no longer 13-year-old Victor.
Thanks for your time this evening.
I'll
Oh,
refrain.
I apologize.
Sorry, just real quick.
I
It's your
didn't-
turn to overlook him
It's-
I
now.
thought we were
That's
just
fine.
closing with the fact that he was 13.
No,
No, I said no longer
Um,
13.
no, yeah. Different state of mind then. But kind of on that, I feel like I'm not able to have I don't want to use the word qualified, but an opinion that can be really substantial because, again, of being able to wrap my mind around what was approved before. So all I can really say is, in regards to this, as I already mentioned to you, or just mentioned it here a little bit ago, that I like the southern portion much more than I like the northern portion because the curvatures, again, that sticks out to me. I do wish that there were more roundabout features as there were in the initial plan. I don't necessarily, I agree with my fellow commissioners. I don't necessarily like the linear aspect of the northern portion, but I do like the community feel. I like that you're extending the Midland Trace Trail. Yeah, again, I just don't feel like I can say enough just because of so much of a year gap in that. So, but thank you again for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody that has further comments, as always, please send them to staff who will aggregate them, get them to the petitioner, and we'll see you again at a future meeting.
Yeah, and if we could have those by, what, the end of day Wednesday, that'll keep some sort of timeline. Just to kind of round out this conversation and not to reiterate everything that came up, I want to put out there, we asked all the same questions you guys are asking, right? I mean, that was our first response too, right? We just did, and we had a lot of those hard conversations early on, and there were some things that were changed as a result of some of those conversations to get probably more into what we're calling the spirit of the concept plan than what maybe was originally submitted. So I'm not necessarily sitting here defending, but because there's probably some more things that could get even closer to that. I think we all acknowledge that. But as has also been said tonight, I mean, we have to measure this against the text of the ordinance and the fact that there is no tie to the concept plan. That's where we landed. So I think Andre pretty much stated very, very cleanly, I think, the process we went through as a staff in evaluating this and working with the petitioner to get this project to this point. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, the public hearing has closed. Written comments to staff by midweek. We do have another item, a miscellaneous business item on our agenda, APC discussion on the comprehensive plan for downtown. This is something that has been a thought that was rolling around in Kristen Berkman's mind. She and I talked about it briefly. She's spoken, I believe, with Ginny Kelleher as well. There are a lot of things happening, and I'm trying to preface this without getting too far into it. I'm not doing a real good job probably, but concerns are coming to light to some of the commissioners and others about dotting I's, crossing T's maybe is all that needs to happen, or we may have some real lack of clarity and thoroughness or full vision of what we're looking to accomplish in our downtown area. There is a reference section in the comp plan about downtown. After Kristen and I had discussed this, I went back and looked a little further, and there is a Grand Junction addendum that kind of is the same thing as the downtown, but it's different name, but I'm not sure in principle if it acts any different. And I'm wanting to review that more. Maybe we need to kind of bring in more current information to that addendum. Might be the missing link that perhaps would help wrap this into a neater package so the development community will feel more comfortable when they have a thought that this might be something to develop in Westfield, and they look at what we have. They'll maybe have a better idea that this probably has legs. Let's bring it along, or no, I need to do something different. But having kind of done that introduction of a sort, I'll pass the microphone to Kristen to elaborate further on what she'd like to help encourage us to think and do.
That was a great introduction.
You're too
Thank you.
kind.
No, you did great. Thank you. I wanted to just talk a little bit amongst our commission tonight. I've been trying to get up to speed myself on what's kind of going on with our downtown, and what I've found is, there's 100% buy-in that we want our downtown to be fabulous. So that's a given. And so then the next step is, how do we get there? And we obviously have a big project that's kind of going right now with Union Square, and then that's kind of extended a little bit. And so I guess what's kind of come to the forefront for me, and I just want everybody to be on the same page, is that there's just a lot going on. There's some questions out there that maybe need further clarification within the 2016 addendum, which, let me say up front, that was incredible work by a great group of people. But I think there's some details, and maybe it's, as Bob was saying, in the implementation tools or ordinances, somehow another layer of detail would be extremely helpful, I think, to our commission in how we evaluate projects that come in, but also to the development community as we look to them as partners in the downtown initiative. And so I kind of went back to our class that we're all taking on being a plan commissioner, and I pulled a few things out that I feel like if we could add another layer to the comp plan might be really helpful. And these come from different angles, you know, from being able to maybe sell our downtown as a really great place for the development community to come, and then also just some of our own issues that really make our community fabulous and show the heritage of our community, and how do we kind of come together with all of those and find great solutions. So I'm going to go over those in just a moment, but I want to say kind of 4 points on why I would like everybody to kind of engage in the conversation. The first being that I think this extra layer would be extremely helpful. The second is that there's currently someone in the community, fabulous person that's done so much for the downtown and really engaged, but that person is kind of trying to bring in a consultant to make a presentation, which would ultimately be comp plan work. And so I think the Plan Commission is responsible for comprehensive plan work. And so I just want to make sure we don't have a lot of people going out and doing a lot of different things, and then all of a sudden it comes to us, and perhaps we've missed some areas that needed to be addressed, which leads me to my third point, which is I think we need multiple lenses of input from all stakeholders in our community to address the missing information. And as I've tried to understand how many stakeholders we have, I think I'm up to about 9 different groups that are passionate about our downtown. And what a great problem to have so many people that love the downtown, they want to give their time and efforts. But we have to find a way to bring everybody together so that we have that kind of input. And then finally, the reason that I really would like for us to engage as a plan commission on this is we really need a transparent and inclusive process with the community. So again, everybody's involved, we're on the same page, we have an official way to communicate, we have an official way to notice meetings so that everybody gets an opportunity to see different presentations. Some of the areas that I've come up with that I think could be helpful for us to consider are a population analysis, a land use analysis, natural features analysis, because we do have quite a few waterways going through the downtown, a housing analysis from a standpoint of residential within our downtown and how many rooftops we need to support the businesses and the office space, a fiscal impact analysis, which would be potential tax base conversations, a traffic flow and thoroughfare planning, what should the community character be, and along with that, maybe a little more detailed work on architecture and how we want that look and feel to be. How are we going to preserve our historic structures, and also the trail connectivity through the downtown. And if we think about each of these as a layer to make sure that we're thinking about all these different areas to really, in the end, have the kind of downtown that we all want. And I think a lot of people are willing to work really hard to see that we achieve that. So with that, I'd love to open up the discussion, conversation, see if others see this as a need. So I'll just open it up. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Do we just want to all blurt out our thoughts, or shall I go around and put everybody on the spot? Andre Mauer, any thoughts?
First thought, I'm sitting in the wrong spot right now. Thank you, Kristen. There's a lot to unpack there. And I don't even know that my thoughts are well enough developed. I'd say it never hurts to take a good look at what the plan is and see if there are gaps that we need to fill. As you were describing some of those needs, I was trying to put it in the context of specific discussions that we've had and trying to remember what were some of the challenge points, which I know there have been some. And I respect the idea. I thank you for bringing it up, and I don't really know enough at this point or have thought about it enough to really go any further than that. It's interesting and something that sounds like maybe we should all look at together.
No problems with those thoughts? We'll go right to left this time and give Victor a second opportunity. You weren't
no.
13 when all this happened, you were older.
I was 15. Yeah, no matter what, I was still in high school. So, but I mean, I think that's what I can bring to the table is just a fresh set of eyes. Being part of, I call myself the token millennial up here because, my generation is going to be the future of Westfield, and we have to have a voice at some certain extent of what we want to see our downtown be, what we want the rest of Westfield to be. And I think it's very beneficial to not just have the younger perspective, but the older perspective as well. Meet somewhere in the middle for Westfield to be a growing and thriving place that we can welcome everyone. And I think that definitely shows with Westfield being ranked the #1 suburb to live in the country here recently. So, I mean, I think that was fantastic. So, yeah, I think that with us going through this course, we've all learned that the comp plan does need some updates here or there, and just try to work together to see what we can do to best benefit Westfield as a whole. So,
Thank you. Cindy Spoljarek.
Yeah, a lot of work went into this addendum back in 2016 when we did the sub-districts. And there is a lot of good detail in there, but several things are different now. We have knowns, well, at least pretty sure on the knowns. Things like 32, things like the location of the new library, probably the parking garage, the 3 recent housing projects, not just housing, but includes business and stuff. We have those things on the books. They're not all built yet, but they're at least rezoned and probably ready to start. So knowing that we have more knowns does actually help to provide more basis, I think, for some more certainty and probably better details in a few of these things. I don't know that we'd have to do the entire downtown. And, that's something I would question. The Penn Street corridor is fairly stable right now. I mean, if we have to look at focusing resources, if we're going to move ahead with this, might want to just make it a tighter geographical area. Usually I'm the one saying, no, I want to incorporate it all, because I want it all looked at holistically. I think you guys have heard that from me before. And that's important here, obviously. But just if we do need to tighten it up, that would be a recommendation. My concern right now is that for staff and for us, really, there's also a lot of other things that we need to be doing. The UDO, there's some other discussions coming, but every time we add something else to the list, I know there's only so many resources in terms of time and money. So that's on my head too. Just put that out there.
Thank you. Dave Schmitz.
I started on the Downtown Westfield Association around that same time, I think, is when this was, well, a little before this was passed, I guess. And there's been over the years some frustration with developers for lack of guidance, and at the time, the plan was largely aspirational, but as Cindy says, a lot of the building blocks have come to fruition or are close to, or at least are proposed. So I'm not sure where, I mean, it's always an evolving, all comprehensive plans obviously are evolving documents, and we've had some big events that alter that evolution or that define where we're going and what progress we've made. So certainly we need to continue, we're gonna have to, the development community will continue to push to develop remaining parcels. And I guess it's a question of whether we want to interject guidance on that process or let the process, take care of itself, the development community, as they propose things, based on what's been done for them. And I guess either approach has its pros and cons, so I don't feel strongly one way or the other. I think we've had some important things that Cindy alluded to that are kind of moving this process along, and to what extent we want to get involved, I guess we'll just see. I don't feel terribly strongly about interjecting or not at this stage.
Okay, that's fair. Mike Johns?
I tend to agree with what Cindy had to say. The downtown plan was put together 5 years ago. I think it's always good to go back after a 4 or 5 year period and just kind of take a look at something and see if it needs any updating. I've also become aware that we've got at least 2, maybe 3 developers who are aggressively pursuing meeting with some consultants to try to identify how to better develop the downtown, looking at it from a financial area. Is the zoning right, and how can we maximize our net financial worth from a development standpoint in our downtown development? So I think those folks have got the ball and they're moving forward. I really think we've got the responsibility to direct that as the planning commission. Once we know that they've contacted at least one consultant already, they've got a meeting scheduled this coming Wednesday, to meet with that consultant. I think that it's in our best interest to participate in that and to try to set direction, knowing what we know, having created the current plan as it is. And I think there's a certain realization that we might not see things happening as quickly as the developers see it. They might always be a couple years ahead of us in their expectations and trying to figure out where they're going to make their investments. But once we understand that they're moving quickly in a direction, I think it's in our best interest to get involved as quickly as we can as the APC. And that may be just setting a steering committee to direct that process, but I think it is our responsibility to do that. That's my thought.
I would completely agree that we need to be engineering, driving this train and not letting the tail wag the dog, kind of, so to speak, that it is our town. We're charged with the responsibility of having the important input on the developments, managing the comprehensive plan, making recommendations. I certainly dread the thought of a huge undertaking and starting from scratch on an entire document, because I think that's not necessary, and having lived that for 2 years a long time ago, and I don't know what it cost back then, but I know that financially it would be incredibly substantial. But I really just don't believe we have that many gaps and missing links and things that are just not right, that the concept of focusing on key things that do need attention and limiting it to that, and to Cindy Spolcheric's point that all the various elements of downtown that were broken apart and talked about independently in the addendum, each one of them probably doesn't even need attention, that it would be a select grouping of those that we could perhaps address. Here's our thoughts, and certainly bringing in the development community to provide us some input. But it's got to be more collaborative and not them really taking the lead on it, because we don't want to live in their town. We want them to come develop in our town. So we definitely need to get ahead of the curve. Once things get out into the public domain in one way or another, this item got on the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. Joe Plankus, who is currently president of the Westfield Redevelopment Commission, had been aware of it and had some conversation with Kristen and provided me a letter, which, because I got it right at the very beginning of the meeting, I honestly haven't read the entire document here, but essentially the Redevelopment Commission is saying, yeah, go. This is kind of what I'm gathering from Joe. Yes. They think this is a bright idea, that we ought to definitely get on board and get going with it. So we have, what is it, 5 willing volunteers perhaps in the Redevelopment Commission to bring in to assist us on this? Because, yeah, don't you though? Speaking of, yeah.
I just have to point out, and it's something that I've really noticed, is what I feel like is a primary disconnect in the whole downtown equation, at least for the parts I'm thinking right now.
Sure.
So in our plans, it's like we want the big redevelopment, and we want the high AV stuff, you know, and the big business kind of effect. But yet, what we love, and it seems like at least what leadership too in this city has at least talked to me about, is keeping it more the smaller, the organic, the ma and pa. And I think there's a disconnect. When you look at the success of Park Street, and now it's going to Jersey Street, and the success of that area for what it is, and what it's brought to Westfield, people come here for that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's not something that we really envisioned before. long
It
time
isn't,
ago.
and I certainly would not ever want to discourage anything like that from happening. Perhaps to kind of draw a parallel to my former business when I first got into it, you don't build regional shopping centers with strictly a bunch of stores, small stores, 2,000 square feet and under, at least at the beginning. And I think there's something similar still happening, but you needed to have one or multiple anchors that would be something that attracted attention. Everybody has to work together, they all have to participate and contribute. But if you only had the small ones, you wouldn't necessarily ever get to be able to the point of being successful as you could be. You still need something big. So we do need, what you first alluded to, some of these major redevelopments, but they need to work in concert with the smaller things that we've already seen organically pop up on their own, and they're great, and there needs to be a place for those, and we don't want to do anything that would hinder that. But that doesn't mean we should depend only on that.
Right.
So we need to,
But I think that's a mixed message, though, that we're sending. We haven't really truly defined where we want the big new shiny and where we want to keep what we have and build on that Park Street, Jersey Street character. So it just, in a very basic level, just to bring it way back down instead of the detail, it's just that kind of thing, I think, is where we need to figure that piece out.
Since my comments were kind of based on the comp plan in general, kind of bring it back to the downtown portion of the comp plan, and I agree with everyone that's spoken so far pretty much. And I think that we're in a very unique position compared to our neighbors, say, to the east with Noblesville, Zionsville, Carmel, Sheridan, et cetera, where we can take the elements that we like from all of those different municipalities, all of our neighbors, and bring it here to Westfield. Much like with the Park Street, you know, that kind of reminds me of Zionsville a little bit, keeping it small, homey, and I think that's what we want to be, with also elements of, you know, keeping, as I look at the bank building there, keeping historic elements, keeping new, updated elements, you know, just trying to be a good equilibrium mesh of everything that we can really be cohesive and bring together. One thing that I really want us to work on is just having a unified front in what we want to be our downtown. because as we've seen within the previous years and this is what we don't want for downtown, is having developers dictate the conversation. We want to be able to dictate the conversation, lead the way, lead the conversation, what we want for the downtown. And because if we just leave it as is, or if we just continue constantly say no, 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 or whatever it may be, then we're gonna have little pocket downtowns all across Westfield. And in 20, how many ever so years, our downtown that we know today is not going to exist. It's just going to be a drive-through with 32, however that might be turn up, whether it be the current plan that has been agreed upon now or not for the next 20, 30 years, however it may look like then. So we definitely have to have that unified front so that way we're all in agreement, whether it be RDC, APC, City Council, Mayor's Office, et cetera, just really have regular constituents within the community, love to hear from as many people as possible, just really have that unified front to make sure that Westfield does have a downtown. We're not just a drive-through city that can really compete with our neighboring cities. So I hope that makes sense a little bit. I just want us to really be unified, work together, pick what we love from Sheridan, Zionsville, Carmel, Noblesville, et cetera, and just make Westfield, I know this term gets thrown around a lot, but make Westfield Bestfield. Bring out the best in what makes us Westfield. So.
Okay.
I like a lot of the comments that I've heard, and especially that, I don't think we need to blow up the comp plan or even the existing addendum. It's just plugging those gaps, right? And like Cindy said, we have some knowns now that we can put a pin in and see how that affects what's around those areas and maybe be a little bit more cohesive in our presentation and intent. So I think, I really like the direction that this conversation's heading.
Thank you. I guess that's more Kristen's thanks. Staff, any contributions from either of you that are present?
No, thank you. This has been helpful for us. We're just listening, right, observing right now, and taking notes and trying to process all of this. Cindy, I appreciate your comment here, your last comment there about really drilling down on, okay, what is a gap? I mean, are there others? But one you identified, we're sending mixed messages to developers. What do we want new? What do we want reuse? That's the first I've ever heard that, right? After 2 years of talking about, well, our downtown plan needs something, and no one's ever been able to define for me what that is, what we've been missing, but everyone feels like we're missing something. So thank you. That clarification is helpful, I think. And if there's other things like that, like specific points that we can focus this effort on, that will be so helpful in narrowing the scope and vision of whatever this turns into, right, from a comp plan perspective, or even just a messaging perspective on how we, what we tell people when we're meeting with folks, right? I mean, that's hugely helpful. And so I guess I would challenge you to think more along those lines. Like if there's anything just specific, you're not gonna hurt anybody's feelings. We need to know what we're missing the boat on, because honestly, until tonight, that's the first I've heard of it. So thank you. We're gonna continue to process and help think through this and put together a strategy. So
I know you're not short on things to do. You're not hoping that some of us up here come up with more work for you.
I think
But
it's a
there's gonna
team
be
effort. It's a team effort.
Yeah,
Don't
so
you
there's gonna
agree?
be guidance needed from community development in some time. I don't know how many staff members. The discussion initiated as a result of this body should get a little more forward thinking in that. So there's 9 of us to do that forward thinking, or at least 7 plus 2 in a slightly different capacity. And I don't know, where we head next exactly, and it can't get forgotten and buried. And I oftentimes think about something I used to hear at the office a lot, somebody who had a lot of kind of snarky comments and wasn't always the most fun to deal with. But he used to ask the question of, how come there's never enough time to do it right, but always to do it over?
Right.
And I think about that a lot. It's like, okay, how am I gonna squeeze it in? Well, I've gotta figure out a way, because it's not getting done and it'll get worse later, and if I have to fix something, it'll probably take more time than it'll take right now. So manage your schedule, Horky, and figure this out. We sort of need to do the same thing in some level here as well.
Again, I would challenge, we need to know specifically what we need to fix. Talking in broad terms is not, I mean,
Right.
it's not gonna help. We're gonna be right back where we
Gotta
are,
get beyond the theoretical.
with people not understanding what our vision is. So,
Kristen, any wrap-up thoughts?
I guess I'd be really interested, Kevin and Pam, for you both, I won't put you on the spot tonight, but you're dealing on the front lines of developers walking through the door. I've already heard some questions myself where there's not clarity, so you guys probably have a list of 20. Like when you really sit down and think what people are asking you and what we could give as a little more direction. I mean, one thing I've heard, which goes with what Cindy said, which is massing. How big of buildings do you want? Where do you want the bigger buildings? I mean, it affects traffic flow, it affects how it looks, what goes around our park is a big question, I think. We've gotten the north side figured out and a little bit of the east side, but we've got a lot of different sides to that park, and how's that all play out in the future? And there's residences there now as well. But as you look forward, if those people want to make a change, if they don't, it's fine. If they do, what would ideally highlight a pretty big investment we've made in the middle of downtown in the Grand Junction Park? I think, I'll just say what I think, okay? I think we need outside help.
Please do, yeah.
I think we need outside help. I really, in my career, I've worked with consultants. I think we're at a point, like I said, I think we have about 9 stakeholders. I won't go through the whole list. These are passionate people. They all need to be heard. And I think bringing in an outside party, which I know involves a budget, it involves coordination, it's going to involve collaboration, and it's going to involve teamwork. And I think we're all up to that challenge if we have the money, which will be up to the council. But I do think we need some outside help. We have the development community and landowners going out and soliciting consultants right now. So, and while, again, that enthusiasm is incredible, it's absolutely incredible, but we need to make sure all lenses are encapsulated on any type of project with a consultant, and that we're spearheading it as a city, just as Victor was just elaborating on. It's, and Bob said it too, it's our city, and we need to make sure it's going down the path we want it on. So I don't know that everybody's ready to make a motion to send this to the council, and Kevin, you can help me procedurally, or maybe Beth can. But I think that there is the opportunity for the APC to make a motion for a comp plan addition just for the downtown, and we probably need to figure out, like Cindy said, which are those sections in that 2016 that we want to focus on. And then it would go to council for discussion at that point on if you wanted to pass the motion and put into process if there's money. Mike, do you have any comments on that, or from a procedural standpoint with council?
It's going to have to come to council at some point in time to have a budget, as far as I understand it. And the budget would be probably to hire a consultant. Probably I would think we'd want to interview 2 or 3 consultants, maybe put out an RFP for somebody to help us. And while we're doing that, it will give us an opportunity, maybe as a group, to sit down and figure what exactly our goals are, what part of our plan do we want to tweak. So yeah, I think it probably has to go before the council. I personally, I think you've got a council that would support you 100% in that effort, to the best of my knowledge. I think Cindy would agree on that. And I'd say, yeah, I think it's up to this commission to move forward.
And I think, you know, there's been a lot of hard work put into the citizen that has worked with someone. So I think that company should definitely be in our group that gets evaluated for sure. So I'll just throw that out as well.
I would just ask to possibly expand it to the comprehensive plan overall, because it's been over 10 years since the initial comprehensive plan was written. So, I mean, just maybe have the possibility of evaluating different pockets of Westfield. What do we want here? Where do we want this? Yada, yada, yada. Not just the downtown. As much as we want downtown to be the heart of Westfield, we also want to make sure the outskirts of Westfield aren't being neglected, and we want things positively happening there as well. I was going to say something else and I forget. So anyway.
Kevin, is there anything, speaking to Victor's latest comment, there is a plan, a study, something that's commenced to start figuring out how to relook at certain business areas. So there is something on a parallel track, but it's not so much a broad view of the comp plan, but a broad view of how to manage future business park area growth in perhaps areas that hadn't been anticipated. And it's hard to predict how many dominoes will fall when you topple the first one. Oftentimes this might be one of those where suddenly you've dropped 4 instead of just the 1. But there is something else going on. But I had made the comment earlier that I dread the thought of opening up too much of it, because I don't believe it needs it, in my opinion, because I really think we nailed a lot of it very well back then, and it still prevails in large part today with some good effectiveness to it. But there are things that we have done over the years, the sports capital, the Grand Junction, there's a number of amendments that drilled down into it. One of the coolest ones was the Spring Mill Station amendment. So we didn't have to open up the whole thing to figure out what to do different there. But
yeah. Just adding different amendments to new areas as different pockets have popped up, like Grand Park, Spring Mill Station, et cetera. Yeah, I think it'd be beneficial just overall to evaluate everything.
Okay. Now, that's another plane, but
Yeah.
is there anything, back to the question I was punting Kevin's way, if you don't have anything, just say so, that's fine. If we haven't gotten far enough along on your department's discussions about how to manage that, then we'll just have to patiently wait a little longer.
We are still kind of working through that, the logistics of that. But I mean, we kind of mentioned several months ago now at this point that we are looking at, or going to be looking at, just an evaluation of our business park section of our comp plan. And what that evolves into is going to be what that process is,
Still
right?
TBD.
So, yeah, but that's going to be coming up here soon.
It's got to, yeah.
So, yeah, to run these parallel is certainly a challenge, not insurmountable, but I don't know. Again, I want to go back to this. You know, I think if we're going to do something downtown, I think focusing on these identified gaps. I think, Kristen, to your question, when we're meeting with folks, I don't want to speak necessarily because I'm not in every meeting. I don't want to speak for my whole team, but personally, when I'm meeting with folks, they're really generally not aware of our plan. So I'll share that with them, and that answers most, if not all, of their questions. So, again, this is some of the first I'm hearing of any real specificity in what our gaps are. I'm not doubting that there are, because I've heard that chatter, but again, I don't know what that means.
Okay.
So, if we can nail that down and clarify and through a process, then great. But
Whenever we
And
can
if there's,
have-
if we're just missing the boat, if there's something we just haven't done or need, we need to know that too.
We might discover this is simple. We might discover it's horrible.
Well, I was just
Probably
gonna-
somewhere in between.
Well, I was just going to say, whenever we can have that forum, whether it be at an end of an APC meeting, whatever it may be, of, just go down the line of, hey, this is what we want for our downtown, here's our thoughts, so that way we can help you the best way possible, because I want to make sure that you guys know what everyone wants up here, so that way when you're meeting with different developers and so forth, you're not leading them astray, and then all of a sudden come up here, it's like, oh, no, that's not what we wanted. That goes back to the whole unified front, and just the different lens that we look at today as opposed to before. Before we were a 3A school and now we're 6A.
Sure.
And so, I mean, it's just that overall growth of the different lens that we're looking through things.
One of the things we used to do, didn't go on for very long, but we used to have combined APC and council gatherings on what we referred to as fifth Mondays. May conveniently has one, except it's Memorial Day, so that's not a lot of help.
I think that's a great
That
idea.
wouldn't work.
I think that would be beautiful. Again, narrowing in on unified front, just so that way, because again, we have a fresh council, we have a fresh APC. Let's work together. We got a couple of years here. Let's do it.
And we could certainly figure out if there's something that can happen, but those aren't going to happen very often, is kind of the concern I would have, that for tackling what we've just been discussing for the last little while, we need something a little more frequent. So our first meetings are generally where we have the public hearings. Tonight's a little bit rare. Second meetings could have time definitely available to it. Our next meeting is June 7th. I don't know what we might have. There's 6 items continued on today's agenda, but presumably most of them might be ready for some activity on June 7th, but if we don't have any public hearings coming up, then there probably wouldn't be a real lengthy meeting on June 7th. Is keeping this as an agenda item for June 7th a reasonable plan? Everybody do some homework, go through the comp plan, go through the Grand Junction Amendment, drive around downtown, walk around downtown, refresh your eyes and look at it from a new perspective and think, all right, based on this discussion we had last Monday, how do I view this building? How do I view this site now? What is it that maybe would be a concern that, with new lenses in front of us, I should bring this up and we should all talk about it? Do we want to focus on some allocation of time on June 7th as our next formal, rather than trying to pick a time to try to squeeze in another meeting that we have to go through all the proceedings to notice and get real specific about, but do it on a regularly scheduled time, and maybe a fifth Monday for the next one could become part of whatever it is that's happening, and we'll know that that's a day this building's available, and we all should also be available.
I won't be here. I'm sorry, I'll be out of town.
Well, I'm not talking about May 31st, but June 7th, you're saying?
June 7th. Yeah.
Well, and we're anticipating a heavier meeting on the 7th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So thoughts on what to do next, Kristen?
That puts us out another month then before trying to have council discuss this.
Well, even if we have a heavy meeting on June 7th, I normally would push back if there's only 1 or 2 items for a second meeting if they don't really need to be done. But we could definitely have a second June meeting, but that is, a month and a little bit longer from today.
Yeah. Mike, what are your thoughts? I'm getting concerned that the train's going down a track, and what I don't want to see happen is there's a meeting scheduled on Wednesday, and because of open door laws, some of us are going, some of us aren't, to see this company, and I think they're going to share a lot of really interesting things. So then, where do we go from there? I mean, once that gets presented, I don't know where the money's going to come from. I'm just really concerned. I know this is a weird conversation, but it's like there's a train that's pulled out of the station to hire a consultant. no one here was even aware of it really, and I just want to get everybody on the same
Well, they're
page.
paying for that, right? I mean, that's the thing. They set this all up and this separate organization is going and paying, right? Right now. I mean, the way that it's structured. Correct?
I
Well,
think
if there's
part
any
of it,
payments, it
but-
has to be that because you haven't allocated any funds from council. So if there is a cost incurred, it's obviously going to have to be somebody else's right now. But even cost aside, I'd be concerned about exactly what Kristen's bringing up. Who's doing this and what's their agenda? I mean, it's all on the assumption that it's good for Westfield, but we're the body that should be not trailing, but leading. So we're getting to that point and trying to do that exactly right now is the serious beginning of it. Does this
Right.
meeting have to happen on Wednesday? Or could a feeler be put out that, can you table this temporarily? Because we need to have a little different perspective on how this is going to proceed. The appointed body that's responsible for these things is ramping up to tackle something, so this might confuse things. I mean, I can't tell them no.
Right.
I don't know who all these people are and who the consultant is and how wealthy they are, but it might be worth suggesting this might be something you could, tap the brakes on. And I don't know who would be the one to talk to whoever that is, but some people know things that I don't hear, so I don't know
I don't,
the viability of what I just suggested.
The stuff that Kristen's talking about, I have not been part of that. I don't know what, I'm not in those discussions, so, other than what you've told me, Kristen, I don't.
and that's the problem, right? I mean, she's part of the
Very much.
council, and that's just what I see happening, and there's no malintent on anyone's part. I mean, everybody wants a great downtown, and everybody's trying to do great things, but we just all have to come together as one, because it's not inclusive to have certain groups going off and they all have what they want, and we've all got to get together and talk, and we've all got to get in the room and move forward together. And so that's, I hate to talk circular here, but I think if we don't move forward with some conversation here of, and I know we need the issues, but we have to bring a lot of people in the room to get the issues. I mean, we have to bring the development community into the room to say, what are you missing? I think they'll be very forthright in what could strengthen the document.
So let me ask, I mean, I'm not, this presentation on, is this a development project proposal?
Can Mr. Plankus talk? Is that okay or no?
I mean, I'm
Hey,
not
this
trying, I
is-
don't want to get into something that can't be, but,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's going to a
there's
point
there's
where-
different things here, right? There's zoning, there's comp planning, there's development, I mean, what level are we talking about here? Because if this is a development proposal, we have a public process in place for that.
Right.
No,
And
I think it's-
everybody
I
that
think it's
needs to be
broader.
included will get
I think it's a
included.
broader issue.
It's a broader.
And I've
All
kind of
right.
come to the conclusion, I think we've gone as far as we probably can with all these outline shadowed characters. If Joe has some specific knowledge, it's a point in the meeting, I'd say let's go ahead and hear from our redevelopment commission or Joe as
Joe,
Are we
hit the mic,
turned on?
please, Joe.
microphone.
This was a great discussion tonight, especially some of the points that Cindy made about the steering committee and some of the other things. I think I see the train, and we're starting to run ahead of the train right now, from I hear some of the comments. Basically, it's going to be, to me, I'll characterize it in my words, it's going to be a sales pitch Wednesday afternoon by an outside firm that's a consulting firm that helps develop, not too different than the firm that we used from Cincinnati a number of years ago. But they do it, they work at I would call it a higher level. It doesn't get into the zoning, it doesn't get into all those kinds of things. But it's a consulting firm, and I know Kristen's mentioned she's worked with a couple as I have. So this is just a preliminary, here's what we can do for you. Now you, Westfield people, determine how you want to move forward.
But they're not talking to council, they're not talking to us. So what's the point?
Well, one of the reasons that Kristen was in a meeting, I was in a meeting with an individual, and that particular individual is bringing this firm in to basically talk to us and see understand what their capabilities are. It's not like the Rubin firm that came in that's going into specific designs, but it's someone that would facilitate actions. I think Mike mentioned that we probably need to interview 2 or 3 firms. Absolutely. You know, you don't want to necessarily go just with the first firm and see what they have to say. But this is a preliminary, lay the groundwork. What can we do for you? And then we, as different people that would be gathered together, and I think moving forward from this particular meeting, determine how we want to approach it. I think the point that Kevin made, where are the shortcomings if we have some? And I think we don't want to, you know, Victor said we should go broader. I don't think we need to go broader, personally. We have an excellent comp plan. We're following the comp plan. The councils over the years have made excellent, and the APC, of course, with your help, have made additional addendums to that comp plan, and it's working. But we're at the point, I think, where we're at downtown. Now maybe we want to fine tune it a little bit and go beyond that.
All right.
That's
But we're still
my,
having too theoretical of a conversation here.
Yeah.
If you, I thought you were going to maybe be able to bring us more specifics on the who's and the whats. But if an outside group wants to meet, I mean, we can't tell them no. I'm not sure I want unsolicited input coming to me from what it sounds like is about to happen. That we need Kevin's input on, here's the folks that would be good for Westfield to bring us if we're gonna have a discussion about this part of our plan.
yeah.
We
And
need to make the selection.
I've spoken
and-
with Kevin before this meeting so that he knew I was going to be providing that letter, and obviously explain what that item was on our agenda as the RDC tonight. And Kevin has raised some very good points, and I think he's raised additional good points this evening. So let's see what these people have to say, and then those that are listening to that presentation, I'm not the one that's organizing the presentation. I'm an invitee, so I'm going to this meeting. And
I'm not an organizer either.
see where it leads to. The discussion on that the APC has had tonight is excellent. I enjoyed listening to different viewpoints, and I think there's some great viewpoints. We just need to see, okay, what do we really want to do with the town? What's the final vision? That's kind of where people are driving it, if I'm saying it correctly, Kristen, to, you know, really put some meat on the bones of what we have already. We know we've got Grand Junction Plaza. What about the rest of it? You know, 31 to East Street, Hoover to the Mazda dealership. You know, what do we want that whole area to know? I think Cindy pointed out, we've got the library, we've got other things in there already. But what else? There's still some other space, and there's probably some areas for redevelopment. What do we want it to look like? I don't know what we want it to look like.
Well, actually, and here's the tricky part, maybe I shouldn't be saying this. Our addendum does do a decent job of calling out, you know, when I look at, say, the Park Street area and stuff, in that area, I mean, it's telling me, you know, pretty much everything I need to know, except for I want this specific coffee company here.
Oh,
Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
We're not trying to
And-
get to that level, certainly not. Yeah,
And-
but I
and
understand
so-
what you're saying.
Again, I think it's more of a messaging problem, and they're not actually reading and understanding our plan. And I'll tell you this, I won't mention actual locations, I won't mention actual projects. I've had developers come to me before filing anything and didn't file with outlandish requests for city participation in the projects. And I think
Yeah.
that is a problem. I think the escalated land values are a problem. I think 32 right now is a problem.
Yep.
And the other construction that's going to be happening along with parking is a problem. And I think you start taking all these things together, and I think that's what hurts. And no one's talking about that. And so I don't know that it's like we need more of a plan to get here. It's like we've got some issues here, some are short-term, some are longer-term, and it's more like, let's tackle those. Like, I'm personally more interested in how we protect Park Street in the coming years. Once the construction starts for 32 and all the vehicles from the construction for Union Square, you start thinking about all this. Are people going to go to dinner on Park Street? Are they gonna come through all that construction? I'm concerned. It's stuff like that maybe it's not really related, but it's tangential to this.
I think it is related, Cindy. It's a short-term concern, without a doubt. How do we not have those companies or firms penalized because of all the other activity that's going on? But I think we need to take it a step further. I think one of the key points Kristen made is, as we see here, just talking well past everybody's bedtime probably, but we don't have that communication system set up. And that's one of the things that I think we need to get, is in order to have all the bodies involved and have that kind of, and also how do you communicate with the community on what's taking place, how do they participate? As you know, when we did the two-year comp plan, we had 275 people there. Everybody signed in. Everybody had an opportunity to listen, to ask questions, and that kind of thing. We did different charrettes. It was a great exercise. I know Bob referred to the 2 years, and it was a long 2 years for a lot of people.
Was it ever?
We worked hard at that. A lot of people worked hard at that. 275 people that participated in varying degrees. So, I think we've had a good discussion. I'm just waiting to see what's going to be said on Wednesday afternoon, and then, throw my 2 cents in for whatever it's worth as to how we might move forward and what we're trying to accomplish. But I think the points that Kevin brought up about, hey, where's our shortcomings in downtown? It's probably this big a problem rather than this big a problem when you get right down to it. But, that's, everybody's going to have the opportunity for an input at some point in time.
I think we've exhausted this
Yeah.
and then some tonight. Whatever
Thank
happens
you,
on
though.
Wednesday is going to happen on Wednesday. We'll hear about it or not.
Yeah. There'll be
We'll
communication,
have
I'm
this.
sure.
Excuse me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
We'll-
Mr. Plankus.
We'll have at least some part of what may be a lengthy meeting on June, whatever I said that was, 7th, to bring this to a fairly focused discussion on the specifics that Kevin's talking about. Try to make a determination on the magnitude of what we're wanting to tackle and what would be the step to take to council, whether it be at that meeting or at a second June meeting, to be able to say, can you start thinking about when you're doing your budgeting for next year, and we're probably going to need somebody for this task, and might take 6 months. There could be a 6-figure number to it. There could be a 5-figure number to it. But
Yep.
you need to plug in some planning and zoning dollars for tackling this project.
So Bob, I'm happy, since I asked for it to be on the agenda, I'll be happy to gather that list for the next meeting. If the commissioners could send the list, and Kevin, if your staff thinks of anything, if you'd like to send it to me, and the public that's here tonight or listening online, if people have comments, if you can send those to staff and you'll forward them to me. Is that okay?
planners@westfield.in.gov. Aggregate a list and have it available for discussion on June 7th, and hopefully have a concise conversation about a step.
If I can have those the Friday before that meeting, June 4th, maybe, off the top of my head, I'll get those sent out to the rest of you for review, just so you're not seeing them for the first time on Monday night.
The first is a nice number, easy to remember.
You're going to give me more time, I'll take it.
No, I'm thinking we ought to hit, of course,
That
it's
would-
right
that
after
would be
Memorial
great.
Day.
June
but
1st then, thanks,
do it a
Bob.
little bit sooner as best as we all can.
What do you need from us exactly?
Any list of concerns that you feel
Is-
like the gaps that need to be filled in?
In the comp plan, or in the
In the
UDO,
addendum.
or in some other fashion?
Downtown
Down-
plan.
Just the
Downtown.
comp plan?
Yeah,
Downtown comp plan,
downtown comp plan.
downtown
Missing
comp plan.
links in
We're
our
real
vision.
focused, downtown.
Missing links in our vision for the
The
downtown.
2016 specific addendum, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
We've got
Kind
about
of
a
referred to as
6-page list
downtown,
of
but
UDO.
the Grand Junction one is what it's titled.
Yeah.
So what are we needing enhanced, added, modified in whatever way in that?
And I do appreciate everybody's time and conversation tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Closed on that one. We're now to the reports and comments. Is there anybody on the Plan Commission that has a random comment they would like to share with us now?
No, I'm going to be in real trouble.
Hearing none, Council Liaison, do you have something to share with us?
I'll let you know about our last meeting. We did meet on May 10th. Our two council appointments to the RDC gave us an update, especially concerning the past quarter or so, but since they started. Talked about how May is Mental Health Month, so everybody keep that in mind. And Councilor Gilbert talked to us about the You Are Enough campaign that the city is doing. And I think you're doing that in the schools too, right, Victor? Yes. Okay. We had the fiscal plan and annexations for North Point Phase 3, Bellcrest, and Caremore. We approved the Maple Note PUD Amendment 6 that we had here. We introduced the Overlook at Woodwind, which is up for hearing here June 7th. If you're interested in that sooner than it gets on the agenda, go look at the last council agenda and you can see that. And also, we introduced the David Brown Drive rezone, also being heard here June 7th. Resolution adopting concerned property owners in substantial compliance with tax abatements. That's our annual thing. We had 2 additions. I think that's why it was on there a second time. And introduced an ordinance regarding an agreement with NDOT for State Road 32, or potentially a cancellation of it, depending on how you look at it. That was just an introduction, and all councilors did say they were generally supportive of State Road 32 improvements. So I just want to put that out there. Ordinance establishing an internal control department and an internal control officer to be appointed. And this is a requirement for us to be able to change the way we are audited. So we've been doing the State Board of Accounts, their normal auditing thing, and it lags behind tremendously. And you have the option as a city to actually do it faster than that by hiring your own, in a nutshell. And so this is setting up that process to be able to do it. That's it.
Thank you. We have a substitute for the uncharacteristic actually having a BZA meeting.
Yeah, put me in, Coach. So I'll work my way backwards here with BZA. We approved a sunroom for a neighbor in our community, signage at Bastion Court, refacing for Tom Roush to fit more of the Mazda brand. We also approved something that I thought was pretty cool for the city. Going to have new touchscreen kiosks around the city, specifically this one going to be at the Monon Bridge there right across from Grindstone on the Monon. And those will pop up around the city here and there as well, so I thought that was pretty cool. Also approved industrial use on, what was that, 161st, 171st? 169th, excuse me, right middle there, 169th off of Oak Ridge Road. And we tabled a project concerning the Chris Center over there out in Joliet Road, just due to concerns with agritourism and so forth. So we'll see that at our next meeting.
Thank you. Community Development Department.
Yeah, no, thank you all for your discussion. Very helpful this evening. And just a quick announcement from our team. BZA members heard this last week, but Tuesday, May the 11th, Dane Crabtree became a parent for the second time. A father, Cora Jane, was born on the 11th. So we're celebrating that. So
Kudos.
thanks.
Yeah.
What's that?
He's got 2 more to go to catch up to me.
2 more to go. I'll tell him you said that.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Victor motions. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Andre seconds. Staff?
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt's left. Ms. Boljeric?
Yes.
Mr. Berkman, or Ms. Berkman, sorry.
That's okay,
Reading
yes.
2 things at once.
You're right.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
And Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned.
9:19 p.m. till June 7th.